Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are going over the suggestions passed to developers for December of 2022, and it's now time to have a look at the naval side of things. We've had a look at a decent amount of this stuff from December. A lot of it has been pretty interesting, so why not kind of cap it off with another video for naval. As always, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel and also like the video. The first one is for America, and it is the Iowa-class battleship, the USS Missouri. Of course, this was a large American battleship, but also the last American battleship to enter service. The USS Missouri was the third ship of the Iowa-class battleships that were built for the United States Navy, as well as the last American battleship ever to be completed, though the thing with the Missouri is that it was actually the last to also enter service. Wisconsin was the last ship of the class that ended up being laid down, however managed to commission earlier than the Missouri. Compared to the Iowa and New Jersey, both Missouri and Wisconsin, despite all being of the same class, were slightly different in design. This difference also applies to the two incomplete vessels, which were planned to have further changes. However, each change with the second and third pair of Iowa classes were done in order to improve the protection of them. As was with all of the Iowa classes, they came with 9 16-inch 50 caliber Mark 7 guns in 3 turrets for their primary armament. The secondary armament consists of 20 5-inch 38 cal Mark 12 guns in 10 twin Mark 28 Mod 2 turrets with 5 on each side, as the ship was designed to serve as both secondary weaponry as well as dual-purpose weaponry for those specific guns. Finally, the ship came with a variety of 40mm and 20mm AA guns to complete their armament, though the number varied on the ship in question and also the time, especially due to the level of additions made on deployment. Another note is that with the 1980s modernization, the ships of the Iowa class saw major reconfiguration as they had armament radically changed, with the dual-purpose battery being reduced to 12 5-inch guns with 6 turrets remaining, the AA battery being completely removed, and in their place, the ship had 4 20mm CWIS mounts added as well as they gained missile systems, with launchers for both Tomahawk cruise missiles and Harpoon anti-ship missiles being installed. The main difference, though, between the first pair and the second pair was the armor. As compared to Iowa and New Jersey, they had increased protection within the bulkheads of the ships, and thicknesses that previously ranged from 287mm to 216 were now sitting at 368mm to 297mm of armor. However, this change seems to have not affected the speed. The Germans have the DKM Bismarck passed, and this was the first of the infamous Bismarck class of 2 battleships built for the German Kriegsmarine in the late 1930s. She is arguably the most well-known German capital ship operated by the Kriegsmarine during the Second World War, and perhaps one of the most famous warships of all time. Currently, neither of the sisters are obviously in the game yet, but I'm sure they will be eventually. Until the signing of the Anglo-German Naval Agreement in 1936, Germany had been bound to a displacement limit for capital ships of a mere 10,000 tons. This resulted in the earlier Panzerschiff, or the Graf Spee, and the following Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, which originally were designed the same. This agreement permitted Germany to construct capital ships with few restrictions or prohibitions, provided that the total displacement of their entire fleet was meeting a certain percentage of that of the Royal Navy. Despite this agreement, Germany had begun designs for their latest battleship in 1933, the first of which to be built in roughly 20 years, and this would be displaced in the pair's overall construction. Largely, they followed principles used for ships built for the Imperial Navy in the First World War, transverse and longitudinal frames with the hull split into 22 watertight sections. This lack of experience would result in a much heavier displacement despite the overall design aim of around 35,000 tons, and both ships, despite being the same class, would feature some substantial differences. The Bismarck in particular had a silver-grey funnel cap, aircraft cranes mounted further aft, and when launched had straight stem unlike her sister with the so-called Atlantic bow. Bismarck was also equipped with a single hangar, each aside the main mast, with a double hangar at the foot, giving her the capability to carry a maximum of 6 aircraft. Laid down at Hamburg in July 1936 and commissioned in August 1940, Bismarck would have a very eventful yet fatefully short service life. Upon completion of her first trials, she would be ready for operations in the spring of 41, and would take part in a sole sortie codenamed Operation Rheinübung. It would be a combination of great highs and also lows, culminating in her eventual demise at the hands of every available unit of the Royal Navy. Now marked in the iconic black and white disruptive camouflage scheme, it was decided that a sortie into the Atlantic to raid British shipping was on the cards. Initial plans had been for 4 ships, for a 4-ship raiding party, consisting of both the Scharnhorst and Bismarck-class ships. However, the Tirpitz was still under construction, and Scharnhorst was undergoing overhaul. Thus, she was to sortie out with the heavy cruiser the Prinz Eugen for company, with the idea of Bismarck providing distraction for escorting capital ships for her escorts to attack the convoys. Venturing out of Calvan's Bay, now with disruptive scheme painted out, the pair would make contact with the HMS Suffolk on the evening of the 23rd of May. The following morning, while still being tracked by both Norfolk and Suffolk, she would be intercepted by the battleship the HMS Hood, then the pride of the Royal Navy, plus the newly built battleship the HMS Prince of Wales. Known now as the Battle of the Denmark Strait, the British pair opened the fire first, with the Germans following a couple of minutes afterwards. However, a 15-inch shell from the Bismarck would penetrate Hood's thin deck armor and ignite the magazine, causing her rapid demise. Hood split in 2 within minutes, leaving just 3 crew members alive. Prince of Wales, now under sustained fire, had also suffered several hits, withdrew under a smoke screen. The Bismarck did not escape unscathed, however. She had taken a direct hit from a 14-inch gun from the Prince of Wales, shipping water and causing an oil leak. This oil leak, although minor on the surface of things, made her both easier to spot and reduced max range, so the decision was made to sail for the coast of France whilst Prince Eugen slipped away. Fatefully, on the following day, she would be attacked by swordfish biplanes from HMS Ark Royal, which would jam the rudder, causing a permanent starboard turn. With every available unit now dispatched to try and avenge the loss of the Hood, Bismarck would eventually succumb to the overwhelming firepower of the Royal Navy. There is a great deal of debate between both sides as to what actually delivered the final blow. The Germans claim the ship was scuttled, and the British say they sank her via a combination of guns and also torpedoes. The wreck of the German giant would be discovered by the famed oceanographer Robert Ballard in the late 1980s, lying upright after sliding over 2 kilometers down the side of an extinct volcano. The next suggestion is for the first Imperator Nikolai. This was developed in response to the Ottoman Navy seeking their own dreadnoughts in the early 20th century, and although it would seem that the Turkish ships would be armed with 14-inch guns, the Russians believed that they could modify an existing design of the dreadnought Imperatrice Maria with thicker armor to compensate at the quickest time available. Preliminary design work began in December of 1913, and she was ordered on the 12th of September 1914 from the Black Sea shipyard in Nikolaev. The Imperatrice Maria was larger than her predecessor at 27,830 tons and 182 meters long. Her armor scheme was the selling point of the ship, with an increased internal splinter bulkhead, as Russian manufacturers could only make a 270mm thick belt at maximum. Steel plates were measured to match the appropriate framing and jointed together to provide distribution against the spall of incoming shells. The upper belt was made out of Krupp cemented armor, the first of its kind in the Imperial Russian Navy, which saved weight. A flaw in the design was the anti-torpedo protection, which was only saved by rather thin, watertight bulkheads behind the upward extension of the double bottom. The Nikolai was laid down on the 28th of April 1915, with the intention to launch her in the fall of the same year, expecting little delays in construction. This was too short-sighted, and naturally the Russian war effort took a toll on the shipbuilding industry. Dock workers were gradually transferred onto other projects like destroyer construction, while materials needed for the battleship's construction waned as the war kept on. She was actually launched on the 28th of October 1916, and the Russians evaluated various proposals in light of poor experience with the Imperator Maria to redesign the ship. The former had poor seaworthy qualities. Russian engineers had suggested installing a forecastle deck to improve sea qualities. However, this was expected to worsen the ship's performance from additional weight. Eventually, they suggested a short bulwark forward, which was more favorable to all parties involved. The 1917 revolution delayed work once again, and the ship was renamed the Demokratia, or the Democracy, the 29th of April 1917, to reflect the changing attitudes in the country. Despite being more than halfway complete at this point, shipyard strikes halted progress, with the provisional government halting work on the 24th of October. The hull was captured by German forces on the 17th of March 1918, and soon after, the new Ukrainian government proposed completing the ship for themselves in 1919. They wanted to rename the ship once again, this time to Soborna Ukrainia, or Union of Ukraine, but this fell through when the Ukraine's People's Republic was retaken by Soviet forces in 1921. Soviet inspectors toured the incomplete hull in 1923 to evaluate her worth, deciding against completing the now obsolete dreadnought. The Imperator Maria was later towed to Sevastopol to begin scrapping in June of 1927. The next suggestion is for the HMS King George V. This was the first ship of the 5 King George V class battleships built for the Royal Navy in the late 1930s. The class, as with the earlier Nelsons, was something that would not be settled without a great deal of debate, and although planned as early as 1933, the ships were severely limited by several of the naval's treaties during the interwar period. The British had not built any capital ships in over a decade, largely due to these treaties. However, there would be a number of designs proposed, over 20 in fact, with 14.0 eventually selected, adapted to the revised 14.P, and given funding for production. Overall armor protection was excellent, with lessons gleaned from weapons testing on 2 of the Iron Duke class battleships between 1931 and 32. The side armor was lengthened and thickened, covering all magazines with splinter protection. Magazines would be below shell rooms and the main machinery reconfigured in an effort to reduce the chance of total disablement. With Britain bound to the treaties, it would result in arguably the best 35,000-ton limited displacement capital ship ever produced, albeit with a lesser than stellar 14-inch guns. In 1931, requirements originally called for a main armament not less than 4 twin turrets akin to the Queen Elizabeth class. However, it would not be until the London Naval Conference in 1936 that limited new capital ships to 14-inch guns. Japan did not agree to these terms, and the delays for new designs and Britain needing new ships fast, the 14-inch guns would be retained going forward. To compensate for this, numerous plans would be drawn up for twin, triple, and quadruple mounts, with 3 quadruples, later revised to 2, and 1 twin with weight concerns given the green light. Uniquely, this made them the only British battleships ever to feature 14-inch guns. In such turret designs, however, this came at a cost. Complexity of the turrets would become apparent during surface actions during the initial stages of the war, but have mostly been rectified by 1943. At a cost of over £7 million, the HMS King George V would be laid down at Vickers Armstrong at Walker Naval Yard, Newcastle upon Tyne, on the 1st of January 1937, and would be commissioned on the 11th of December 1940, given pennant number 41. The King George V is one of the more famous ships of the class, and would be a welcome addition to the game should battleships arrive at some stage in the future, which of course they already have. The King George V class represents a relatively strict adherence to treaty limits of the time, and for the displacement were excellent designs. So overall, not too bad in general. The next one is for Japan, and it is the battleship Yamato of the Yamato class, specifically the 1945 variant that was sunk. Now, this article is really poor when it comes to its English. I understand that not everybody is a native English speaker or writer, but as I've said many times, get people to proofread your work, and it will improve by 2,000%. I'll just give you a reading of the first two paragraphs just to show you why this is pretty much ineligible, and I'm not wasting time trying to translate it for you, since this is the thing that was actually passed to the devs. Yamato is a name ship of Yamato-class battleship that completed in 1941. Name was taken from old name of Nara-Pref, and it is one of the another name of Japan. Lots of Japanese warships were using another name of Japan, Fuso Akitsushima, Shikishima, Yashimi, etc. But the Yamato is the most famous another name. English Wikipedia translates it to Great Harmony, but actually there is no such meaning. There are various theories about origin of the word Yamato, but also all theories says the kanji Yamato was used to only pronounce of kanji without regard to the semantically. Project of new capital ship was started since 1934. In that time, Japanese newer battleship is only Nagato class, and other battleships are very old, so they needed to replace them. Also, London Naval Treaty Limited. Japanese battleship than UK and US. To overcome this inferiority, Japanese Navy decided to build battleship that larger than Panamax size, with superior 18-inch cannons. At first, they restart the project of 20-inch and 18-inch guns. Originally, this project was started for next-gen battleship of 8-8 Fleet. They prohibited the call to call it 18-inch for secrecy, and they call it Type 91 alternately. Afterwards, in the order to experimental production of 18-inch gun in July 34, IGN named it Type 94 40cm naval gun. Around this time, Japan was isolated by the militarism policies. Because of it, in July of 1934, Prime Minister Okada decided to discard naval treaty. Because of it, in October, IGN General Staff ordered new battleship with 18-inch guns to IGN Technical Department. His project, get design number A140, and 22 design were considerate. Finally, design A140F5 was submitted to the Imperial Diet. To camouflage real-size battleship, they also submitted fake destroyers and submarines. Specifications of design A140F5 was below. 65,200 tons, 253 meter waterline length, 40mm max width, main gun 3 times Type 94 40cm triple, secondary 4 times 15.5cm triple, and high angle gun 6 times 12.7cm triple. Then also 12 25mm twin, 4 30mm quadruple machine gun. The Italians get the Roma battleship. Basically, the Roma was a battleship of the Regia Marina, the third and last unit of the Littorio class, sometimes also referred to as the Vittorio Veneto class, which represented the best of Italian naval war production of the Second World War. It was built by Cantieri Riuniti del Andrantico and delivered to the Regia Marina on the 14th of June 1942. After Italy's unconditional surrender to the Allies, the Roma was ordered, along with other warships, to the Sardinian island of La Maddalena, as agreed with the Allies. The Italian naval squadron, however, was attacked by German bombers using Rushdahl SD-1400 radio-controlled gliding bombs. The first attack failed, but the second inflicted heavy damage on the Roma, but did not sink her. The third attack hit the ship. The bomb exploded inside the forward engine room, causing catastrophic flooding and the explosion of the number 2 turret magazines. Sinking forward and tilting to starboard, the Roma capsized and broke in two, taking 1,393 men with her. The battleship sank on the 9th of September 1943. In her 15 months of service, Roma traveled 2,492 miles in 20 outings at sea without participating in any naval clashes, consuming 3,320 tons of fuel and being out of service for repairs for 63 days. On the 28th of June 2012, after decades of searching, the wreck of the battleship was found at a depth of 1,000 meters and 60 miles off the Gulf of Asinara. And last, we have the HNLMS Friesland. This was a post-World War II machine. Basically, it starts off with the post-war era marked a significant change for the Royal Netherlands Navy. With its fleet of cruisers and coastal defense ships no more, the Navy made a concentrated effort to focus on anti-submarine warfare, which presented the latest new threat in naval warfare. A budget of 48 so-called submarine destroyers were considered, but a lack of funding quickly scaled back this possibility. Starting in 1950, 4 ships of the Holland-class destroyer were constructed. However, the Dutch soon encountered problems with the propulsion and stability of the vessels. These problems were exacerbated by the fact that the Dutch had not formally built ships since 1939, and the German invasion stifled all existing expansion plans. A lack of raw materials and a skilled workforce, the Holland class was doomed to fail from the start. In response, under the 1951 Defense Memorandum, the Navy put in an order for 8 Friesland-class destroyers, which were expected to remedy these problems. The Friesland class was better armed, faster, and equipped with the latest domestic radar designs. What had almost been a complete failure of a program was saved, and the Friesland would make its mark on Dutch naval ingenuity. It was constructed by the NDSM shipyard of Amsterdam, with her keel laid on the 17th of December 1951. She was launched on the 21st of February 1953 and commissioned on the 22nd of March 1956. Friesland has the unique Dutch distinction of being involved in some of the most remarkable events of the Cold War. In a goodwill voyage on July of 1956, she visited the Soviet port of Kronstadt at St. Petersburg, receiving a welcoming crowd. This was the first time since 1914 a Dutch naval vessel had visited Russia and the first time the USSR. During the 1960s, relations were fast deteriorating between the Netherlands and Indonesia. Indonesian President Sukarno was planning to invade Dutch New Guinea with Soviet assistance, and in response the Dutch deployed a carrier task force to deter the invasion force. In a show of force, the HNLMS Friesland fired warning shots at Indonesian vessels approaching the island at Misol and forced the Indonesians to withdraw. This is the only instance of the Friesland firing her guns in anger. The rest of her career was rather calming, taking part in NATO exercises and patrolling the remnants of the Dutch overseas empire. The HNLMS Friesland was retired on the 29th of June 1979 and subsequently scrapped, unlike all her sister ships which were sold to Peru. That is all of the ships which were passed to developers for December 2022. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.